Ambedkar's thoughts on economy of England and colonial India. Ambedkar critically examined the historical and economic condition of England. England under the rule of Norman conquerors was in a pitiable condition. Normans used derogatory terms for Anglo-Saxons, who were denied justice by the iniquitous Norman magistrates. However, the historians British of India had a wrong notion that Indians were ignorant and uncivilized and portrayed them not in good light. Ambedkar quotes Sir Thomas Munro's words to English historians of India that ancient Indians were far better economically than the English of the same period. According to Ambedkar, if we recall the economic conditions of England before and after 1600 and India's tribute to England, we will get the answer to the question why England prospered and India declined after the religious Reformation period. India contributed, or was forced to contribute, to the economic prosperity of England. Quoting Sir Josiah Child, Ambedkar points out that in 1545 the trade of England was inconsiderable and merchants were very few. Describing the prosperity of the people after 1600, Sir Josiah reveals that in the stock exchange, there were more traders now with £10,000 estates than there were with £1,000 estates in 1545. 60 years ago, a man who could give a £500 portion to his daughter was held in higher esteem than a man now who could give £2,000 to his daughter. Where earlier there was one coach, now there were 100. Most men paid a higher tax now in 1 year than their forefathers did in 20 years. Trade had improved with transportation of goods, which resulted in customs duty being increased 6 times. The mercantile class had become very powerful by the year 1600 and was instrumental in determining whether the rulers of England were vanquished or restored to power. Ambedkar presents a vivid account of the East India Company's main political and economic motives. The rule of the company was anything but wise. It was rigorous, it gave security but destroyed property. The scheme of administration was not perfect. Ambedkar quotes Adam Smith, who said that the merchants were incapable of considering themselves as sovereigns, even after they had become the rulers. For them, governing the state was secondary, because their prime objective was business and trade, buying and selling. The merchants cared about their own interest and not the interest of the state. The proprietors and directors of Indian stock did not get any monetary benefit but got voting rights, which gave them some influence. Therefore, even a financially moderate person was willing to give £1,300 to £1,400 merely for the influence which he expected to acquire by means of a vote in the Court of Proprietors. This gave him a share, though not in the plunder, but in the appointment of plunderers of India. Adam Smith describes how the merchants did not care about the prosperity or ruin of the Indian Empire, how, unlike any rulers ever, they were completely indifferent to the happiness or misery of their subjects, the improvement or waste of their colony, the glory or disgrace of their administration. This was true of the early rule of the company. Later, gradually corruption was uprooted. However, under this regime Indians had no voice, no job, and were barred from all high-paying jobs except petty positions like clerks. Colonial India's contribution of trade and stock to England's economy. India contributed to the economic prosperity and mobility of shareholders, merchants and wealth of England by trade and stock. Trade is forefront in the expansion of wealth. Stock is a barometer of business conditions. Hence, we will see how much that stock would be a useful criteria to determine the value of trade with India in England. The following paragraphs help us to understand how, even though the market fluctuated greatly, the company made great profit. The stock of East India Company had increased to 8% after the union with Scotland in 1709, rose to 9% in 1710 and 10% in 1712. However, there were fluctuations due to competition with the French East India Company, increase of capital cost, formation of the Swedish East India Company in 1732, sectarian wars in Europe, war in Karnataka. While the dividend rate increased to 8% in 1744, the average rate of dividend was about 9% in this century. The company's stock had top position throughout 18th century. The stock was valued at £450 in 1720, but fell to £148 in 1755 when Burdwan and other provinces were ceded to the company. Increased cost of administration caused 6% decline of dividends in 1760. Even the stock value was more than the real value. Let us suppose an average dividend of 10% and interest at a moderate rate of about 5-13% on the cost price. As there was no profit on this stock, there was a continuous fall of stock until 1766. From 1779 to 1788 the price became reasonable and averaged to £150. Critique of colonial economy. However, it fell to £118 and 10 shillings in the crisis of 1784. The stock fluctuation was regulated by the trading company as it became a sovereign ruler and enacted the Pitt's India Act, which resulted in increasing the price to £185 and 10 shillings in 1787. Subsequently fluctuations declined. The company had expectation to get higher profit from Bengal revenue, which caused an artificial boom and inflated the price to £233, but the stock declined to 60% because of the war in Karnataka. However, the company received £1,916,644 for each year, and after the acceptance of territorial sovereignty of Bengal, the dividend increased to 10%, and the distributed amount was £3,408. This increase of dividend was unjustified and based on an exaggerated estimate of India's property. The dividend was paid by means of a loan at very high rate of interest. Later the dividend fell from 12-12% to 6% for 5 years. Lord North intervened to regulate the company dividends, which were subjected to ministerial control after the Regulation Act was passed. This helped to increase the value of property and dividends slowly. In 1792, the company signed a peace treaty with Tipu Sultan, because of which it received a revenue of £2,400,000 and a compensation of £16,000,000. This enabled the company to increase its dividend from 2% to 11%. The United Company of Merchants had paid to the English public £2,534,215 from 1798 to 1803. India provided England £38,586,666 for its war with America. Mr. Yale, who earned money exclusively from trade with India, set up the Yale College in the U.S. Thus India paid dividends to the stockholders of England and contributed to the wealth of England. Ambedkar quoted George Tucker to demonstrate how colonial India contributed to the prosperity of England. The East India Company drew a surplus revenue from India of around £1.5 million sterling after paying interest on their debt. This surplus was a direct tribute from India to England. Around 4/5 of the territorial debt was being held by European British. The interest on the debt was nearly £2 million sterling, which may be regarded as indirect tribute paid by India to England. Tucker estimated this indirect tribute together with the savings and profits from commerce at £3 million sterling per annum around the year 1821. England earned income by forcing Indian traders to use British ships for port-to-port transportation. Thus Indian ship tonnage formed a considerable portion of the whole tonnage of Great Britain. During this period in England, the state faced difficulties in providing employment opportunities. Indian service sector opened space to the overflowing classes in England seeking employment, thus economically contributing to England.